Hello, thank you for joining me today and welcome if you're new. I wanted to come on and join in consciousness and powwow together in these really super intense energies. Wow. I feel like this weekend we just absolutely skyrocketed into this whole new terrain, and it feels like there's so many different things going on so many different levels. I was feeling this in that last video that I did and the video before, but now it's just like, holy shit, completely off the charts. In the area that I'm at right now, we have this really huge wildfire in our beautiful Gila wilderness in our forest. So for friends on Facebook, you probably see me like every other day sharing photos of just the beauty of this area, and it's on fire, and it's at I think 28,000 acres or something like that, and we're only on day 5.5. It's super windy today, so there's that kind of intensity. But again, like I always talk about, whatever is going on in our communities or in our individual lives is connected to the energy at large, because it's all just fractals of the same energy. So this going on in my town. Now my town, I was reminded recently, I remember hearing this a long time ago and I completely forgot. We're on the 33rd ley line. So okay, there's that. And then we're also surrounded by copper mines. And copper, and a couple of different people have reminded me of this in the last few months, is a real amplifier and magnifier. So the energy here is really intense. Most of the people that are here either get trapped here or they're called here. I was seeing it in my dreams before I came. And so there's a lot of light workers, there's a lot of way showers. I know in some areas there's just you don't know anybody because you're the only one assigned to that part of the grid. But here there's a lot of us, but there's also a lot of darkness here, a lot of parasitical energy, and a lot of karma, and a lot of it's just a really freaking intense place. So if you're also in an intense location on the planet, on the ley lines, you might also be having really extreme things going on in your community or in your environment. It's just adding to the mix because you were assigned there for a reason, right? So sometimes there's a fractal of the larger energy just to get you positioned into the right configuration of energies and whatnot, just so you can have the crunch that you need. So for me, not only is there the fires in my best friend, but my daughter is away for 3 weeks, so I'm alone for the first time in a year and a half. So I've been diving really deep. So there's a lot in my psyche that's coming online. Okay, so there's that, and so then my routine's off and stuff like that. So it's just and I've been noticing that with a lot of people. That, in fact, I've talked to a couple of different people. Another woman, her housemate was gone for the exact amount of time, for 3 weeks, just like mine. And then other people with injuries or with family all of a sudden with them, so that your routine and your usual way of grounding yourself and moving about your day is a little bit jostled up. So it's almost like being jostled up so that so that whatever needs to come in and whatever needs to go can more easily go. But it's not always that comfortable. Okay, so a lot of us dealing with that. And then on top of that, was this whole thing this weekend with the protests. Okay, so trying to think of how to word this, because I know that some of you are going to be right on the same page with me, and some of you, these might be new. This might be a new perspective, and all across the board, because again, there's a wide variety of people I know that watch these videos. And so okay, so here goes. So even if I didn't know anything that was going on in the world, the energy to me would have still been loudly screaming, palpable funk, And so I remember this during in 2020, during the Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and all that, where I remember sitting in my room, and I was sitting in front of the open door. It was such a visceral moment for me, and I felt so agitated, and just the energy in me. I felt like I had a river inside of me, and it wasn't mine, and then I realized, oh, literally, this is not my energy. This is not my circus. Is not my, this isn't how my natural energy field feels. And I know when it's those of us that pick up on the collective energies, right? It's when you're upset or jostled because you just had an interaction with somebody that upset you, or you exposed yourself to something for too long, or you made a bad decision and now your energy's all jacked up and you got to go walk in the forest. But when it literally seeps in through the walls and you just wake up and you just feel this everywhere, it's the collective energies. And so this weekend reminded me so much of how it felt during that time. So again, the protest energy, but what is that protest energy? It's like, first of all, you're and see, this is where that mind control type of energy comes in. So I lived with I was in a very cult like situation for 7 years, and then it took me a really long time to sort of decompress out of it. And so that sort of like mind fuckery is really, really, really familiar to me. So if there's even like a nuance of that, I feel it in my body react. So it's the type of thing where like your very human and very beautiful natural desires for the things that all humans desire, like unity and equality and love and freedom and all these things, get hijacked and corralled into a way that feeds the very system that is creating the issues that we're having, right? And a lot of people not being aware of that because they feel like, oh, I can do something, I can do something about this injustice, or I'm going to gather together. But the very energy of it, and if you are sensitive to energy, it's like nobody can tell you otherwise. It's like you feel the disharmony, you feel the frequency, the fragmentation, whereas you know what it feels like when you're in alignment, when you're sitting in nature, you're in the water, or you're with a friend, or a soul, a kindred soul that can see you and hear you, and you're on the same page, and your body feels relaxed, and it's like you feel a channel, you feel connected to everything. And this is not the type of energy that was going on this weekend. This weekend it just felt so fragmented, okay? And so that's the thing, and that's the energy. That fragmented energy is the energy of the hijack and of the fragmentation that we're all trying to awaken and rise out of. And just that just that kind of what are the words, the misguided actions, who think that we're going to make a difference in really literally engaging and feeding the very program that we're trying to evolve out of, and to the real directive to come in and come into ourselves, and to come into that harmonious oneness, like sitting in your garden with the birds and harmonizing with yourself and with the world, with your energy, is far more effective in creating change in the outer world than anything that involves any amount of divisiveness or against or other or righteousness or anything like that. And I know probably most of the people that watch these videos already know that and resonate with what I'm saying, but just saying it for those of you that might not think of it that way, because there is a lot of mind control, and there is a lot of corralling people, and then you feel like if you're not doing that, if you're not going along with what's popular, with what everybody else is doing, then you're somehow missing the boat, or you're bad, or gosh, worst case scenario, that means you're over in this camp, and just all that like social programming and peer pressure and bandwagon jumping, and just going along because it's the only option being offered to you in the outer world. But remembering to pull back our energy and look for the options within our inner world and within that quantum space and all the realms that can open up multidimensionally when we step outside of the game, and paying attention. So this is what's been coming up a lot recently that I've been talking about especially since those eclipses in March, is the ways in which we're leaking our energy and feeding the very systems that are holding us down and trapping us. Feeding them, because when we're upset, or when we're looking outside of ourselves, or when we're falling into games and prompts for divisiveness and us and them and anything in the duality construct and mind frame, then we're feeding, or in all those other insidious ways. Like in the last video, I was talking about the sexual energy and the hijack on the sexual energy, and so many things that have become normalized in our society. But some of them are more blatant and easy to see than others. But it just depends where our wounding is and where we've been hooked the most, and what our soul missions are here, and all of that. And so what I felt really strongly in the energy this weekend was the feeding frenzy on the loosh, on any amount of anger, any amount of divisiveness, any amount of even ego in or better than, or just like all these like denser emotions, and then the feeding frenzy. And so but we know, and one of the things that somebody reminded me of this weekend is it's like it's, and we were talking about this last time too, always it's like the world of duality, so it's two sides of the same coin. So wherever there's an uptick in darkness, there's an uptick in light, and they're reflections of each other. And so all this solar energy coming in, and we had another large flare, not an X flare but an M8 flare, and then a CME coming in off that, landing any moment now, in coronal holes, and geomagnetic storming again. All these things just keep coming and coming and coming and coming. And again, the solar maximum really only started about 3 years ago. So before that, we maybe had like one X flare in 1 year, and just not that many. So it's just constant now. We're just in it, even though we're kind of coming out of the maximum. What I've been hearing is as we're coming out, or when some of the like really biggest activity can be happening. So remembering where we're at in the photon belt, remembering all the information, the codes that are coming through our galaxy. This is the ascension cycle, where we're at in the cycle of the yugas, and all of this, remembering that, okay? So we must be making really good progress, because here we are with this huge uptick from the opposite polarity. And that's what I was feeling this weekend. I was feeling a lot, I know myself and others were feeling a lot of energy around being hunted, and just feeling almost like Agent Smith, like everywhere you look, it's like there's that frequency coming at you, wherever it's coming through, whether it's coming through people, or whether it's coming through psychic attack in your dream space, or, whatever it is, mold, all the different ways that the self-serving, life atrophying frequencies can come through and kind of infiltrate. And so there was a lot of that in the field, So a lot of us having psychic attack, a lot of us feeling hunted. There was, just talking with somebody today, and there was, he was like walking around at night, and somebody was like pulling a knife on him. This is in a small town, so just weird stuff like that. Almost everybody that I talked to was having some sort of attack in some way or another. So a lot of that parasitical or predator type of energy in the field, and you could just feel it. Like I literally could feel it, and it was triggering my PTSD, because I used to feel like with my ex, when we were in the custody battle, I could always tell when he was conniving and when he was planning something. I could feel it. I could feel him over there in his mind. I could feel it in the field, and then lo and behold, I'd get something in the mail, some court order or some summons or some, whatever it was. I felt that same kind of energy in the field the last few days. Yesterday and the day before, it kind of lightened for me, after the protests were over. But yeah, there was a lot of that. So any of us that have that hypervigilance, where you've had a predator and you can feel when they're planning something, our spidey senses would have been up this weekend, because your neural pathways are trained to detect that kind of thing for safety. And so once you know that frequency and you know that energy, nobody can tell you that it's not what it is. So yeah, again, it depends on your life path and your mission, and what aspect of all of this you're tuning into, which parts that you're really aware of that others might not be. So and that was the other thing that was really strange for me, is feeling all of that, and knowing that not only was there this agenda, there was this mind control, there was this slippery sticky thing, then there was the feeding on the energy of the people that were going along with it, and then there was the rise in it. So we've been talking about this a lot too. Like, if you're connected to the unity grid and the law of one, then you're outsourcing from all that is, and you have infinite magnetic power. And once you really align with that, then you really have everything that you need, and you can just surrender and be in the flow. But if you're not in that energy yet, and you're in the energy of separation, then you have to really hustle to get anything going in your life. And if you're an entity or an archon being that literally your whole mission is to be separate from all that is, and you don't want anything to do with it, then those are the types of things that are going on in our world, where they're constantly having to revive their false creations. Because if it's a false creation, it's only going to be able to sustain power for as long as you can feed off of those that are giving you their power. And how do we give away our power? We give away our power by going along with these things, and not having that inner discernment to see. Because like with my ex, it's like he could make anything sound completely reasonable, in the mind. It's like it's all there, and you have every little angle covered, and it all makes sense, and it's all logical, but it's like this little sub reality, and it's like in my heart, it never felt coherent, and it never felt like it it just didn't feel woven to anything else. And I got into such extreme cognitive dissonance. And that's one of the ways that you can tell that there's some sort of mind fuckery going on. If you don't know this already, just to share, you'll feel that cognitive dissonance, and you'll feel confusion, and you'll be doubting yourself, and you might feel like you're crazy, and you might feel like, kind of paranoid, and like you can't relate to anybody, and, it can be all very, very subconscious, but all those being indicators that you're caught up in some sort of mind control program. And the mind control programs can be very alluring. They can be very sticky. They can have a magnetism. It's not actually magnetism. It's almost like a spell. It's like a false magnetism, but it feels like magnetism, where like you're kind of drawn to it. Like, do you ever, somebody, like, I had this experience the other day, like somebody walked into the shop, and his energy was so, like, I wanted to run out of the store because his energy was so fragmenting to me, and it was like a black hole vortex that was just like pulling towards him. And I was aware of the fact that when I was younger, I would have been like, ooh, what's that, like, what is that? Wow, that's so interesting. I would have went right to the black magician, and I still have that in me a little bit. Like when I see somebody that's running that energy, it catches my eye, like, ooh, what's that? And then it's like, you know what that is now, honey. You know what that is. But just noticing how, like, I was observing myself in that. This was a few weeks ago. How, like, wow, the old me would have been drawn to that, and a lot of people are, because those people, they're pulling the energy towards them, and it puffs up their energetic field. And so if you're just picking up things subconsciously, but you're not like really conscious of it, you can be drawn to that person. That's that false magnetism, because their energy field gets really big and they puff themselves up. But again, it's false. And just to be aware when you might feel like you're around that person, you're drawn to them, but you feel a little bit less than, or you feel, confused, or you feel kind of bad about yourself all of a sudden, or you feel small, maybe your shoulders are getting, and it's like, that's because they're taking up all the space, and they're probably viewing that way, and you're viewing yourself the way they are. And just paying attention to those nuances, because, man, it's like, if there's ever a time, and again, what I was saying a little bit earlier, if we really, really, really want to shift this hologram and come into experiencing our birthright and the heaven on earth that we're here to create, we need to stop feeding those systems, and we need to be discerning about the mind fucks and the veils and they're like spells. It's like in the Labyrinth, David Bowie with his his little ball, and the ball is floating around, and you're kind of magnetized by this, and oh, look, we're all here, and then I think she like throws a chair or something, and it all shatters, and David Bowie's just kind of like, oh man, like, oh, you saw through it, and just being really, really aware and careful wherever you go to look for the spins, because they're everywhere. It's like a sticky web of deception. So again, it's like, if we really, want to break free and to live in that expanded birthright, we want the peace, the unity, all the things that we might be protesting for, in the streets. We do that by seeing where we're feeding the very systems, and often we're feeding them in the exact way that we think we're liberating ourselves and others. And just being aware of that. And if this is a new idea to you, you might want to just sit with it and let it kind of percolate a little bit, and pay attention to the subtle energies in our body. We've been so conditioned to ignore our body signals, to ignore that in your stomach, or ignore when your one shoulder might get a little tight. Like, I notice my left shoulder, if there's a predatory type of energy, or if somebody's looking at me in that way, like my shoulder will get tight, my arm won't swing, and it's like, oh, there's a predator around, just like noticing all the ways that your body, or the frequency, or the way you can register frequencies, can inform you and give you information, because it really is. So I was talking about that last time when I finally pulled some cards. How long did I talk? 18 minutes. So I'm doing it again. But there's just a lot. There's a lot that comes through just in just like this. So, but yeah, I was talking about, when I did pull the cards, it was talking about shit. I lost my train of thought. Taking it really easy. Oh, and like walking through landmines. Like, go slow, have a lot of self-love, pull back your energy if you need to. Don't judge yourself if you can't get done what you need to get done, or whatever it is, because I said it's almost like we're walking through landmines. And we are walking through landmines. We're walking through the landmines of our and everybody else's unprocessed shadow, as long as the landmines of the entities and beings that want to feed off of that. And it's like, the more you awaken to the spiritual warfare, the more you realize that the way through this is to fine-tune your discernment, your energetic frequency-based discernment, your discernment towards frequencies, okay? and that type of thing, and paying attention to the body and bringing your intuition back home. And so a really big opportunity to practice that this weekend. And I was so overwhelmed with like the fires, and then again, like I was saying, my routine all off, and then all this sort of like the triggers from the mind control energies that I was feeling in the realm, also triggering my energies from the past. So there was a big clearing going on as well. And if you are sensitive to those energies, you're probably finding that as well. Not only is it sort of like for me, there was a lot of like, oh my God, I feel so alone. Like, why isn't anybody else seeing this? Of course, we know why, because it takes a lot to deprogram from the conditioning we've had for lifetimes. And a lot of people have just been in the system, they've been in their jobs, and they haven't had time. Like, I had everything torn away from me, so I had all the time in the world to dive into my pain body and dive into alchemy after alchemy. So it's like, my path was shitty, in terms of like the 3D world. I was not having a good time, but I managed to kind of liberate myself and realize some things in the midst of that. But some people are doing that soul excavation later, and so they just don't know yet. So that's also why I'm talking about that, putting this out there for those of you that might be feeling these things but didn't really understand what was going on, or some of you that maybe are going along with the program but feeling a little funny about it, just to voice it out loud, because I have had a lot of time to come into integration with these types of things just through my journey, like taking one for the team, and now feeling really guided to just speak up about it, even if it makes me very unpopular, in the town that I'm living in, oh wow. Yeah, so, but anyway, and then the other thing, with these protests I was talking about the ley lines, and my town being on the 33rd ley line, a lot of, and Laura Hazel was commenting on this as well, a lot of the major cities are placed on power spots, just like, if you are aware of the ley lines and the grids and the pyramids and the hijack and the overlays on top of that, a lot of the churches and, the cities and, going on and kind of harvesting that power and redirecting it for, again, self-gain rather than and blocking the unity grid where we're all, which is what's natural, the natural harmonics of this realm that we all are, it's our birthright to have access to, kind of covering those up. So it's really interesting, all these protests in all the major cities, and just, again, the two sides of the coin. On the one hand, in the upset and in the divisiveness, there's a feeding to that darker fraction, which a lot of us could feel, and it was very, very, very uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable. And some of you might have been feeling like, oh my gosh, like where's the light? It's like it blocked out the sun. It just blocked out the sun, because the distorted energies are louder, because, like I was saying earlier, the distorted energies, they feel like this, so you're like, whereas harmonious energies feel good, and you just feel good, and that's what's natural. So it feels natural. So you tend to feel really knocked off when the energies are knocked off. And so but it's not actually louder. We can feel like, oh my gosh, what happened to God? What happened to unity? Like, what we're in a hell realm now, and we're never gonna get out, and it can kick up some of those depressed, just sort of paranoid feelings, and then that can bring in the entities that want to feed off of the feelings that you're having, and that's part of the rippling, the domino of that, when the darkness kind of gets a boost, and then it kicks up our feelings of despair, because one, we're feeling that in the collective, but two, we're feeling other people feeling it, so it becomes sort of like hypnotic or addictive almost. Like what's the word? Contagious. It becomes contagious, right? But then as we start to feel that, then there's even more feeding off of you, and then it gets even worse, and then you gotta like clear your house, you know what I mean? It's just awful. This weekend was really, really rough. It was rough for me, and I know it was really, really rough for a couple other people that I talked to as well, where just like, and it, depending on how sensitive you are, and depending on how many neural pathways you have kind of attuned to that. Like sometimes for a while we can be really oblivious to it. Like I was really oblivious to it for a really long time, but once you know it, you know it, and it can be really painful. But if you are somebody that feels those type of energies, you're also being placed in them to anchor, because even if you're getting knocked off and you're just kind of like tweaking around, you're still you still have the integrated vibrational frequency and the geometry that you have that's natural to you. Even if it's a little clouded and fuzzy, you're still a little light in that density, your consciousness and your awareness. And so what I kept feeling was, even though I'm really uncomfortable and I really know what's going on, and I'm like so fucking paranoid right now, and like I went down to Mystic to read. That's the shop that I read tarot at on Fridays and Saturdays. And I just had to go home. I went home. I was like, I can't function. I can't human. And I called off the next day too. I tried to go down to the farmer's market, which is kind of like, like it was awful. It's the worst I felt in a really, really, really long time. And that was on Saturday. So I just came home and I cleaned my house and I powwowed with, I call them my canaries, where I'm like, how are you feeling? And like, we're all feeling the same thing. So we could kind of anchor and ground. But what I felt like it was really important to just honor what I was feeling. Like I couldn't just go about my day and pretend it wasn't happening. I had to sit with it almost like a vigil. And even though I felt horrible, it's like, I have to see this because I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it, and because a lot of people are not seeing it. So those of us that did see it had to just sit there and see it, and to sit there and stare into darkness, or stare into mind fuckery or mind control, or feeding or loose, or it was the worst I've ever felt it in my entire life was when my daughter had that AI overlay on her, and occasionally, and they were trying to get her to kill me or kill herself so she wouldn't kill me. Like it was just, and it was this whole like a lot of you know about this. Some of you have talked about this before. Probably think I'm crazy. I do not care if you think I'm crazy. Walk in my shoes and then tell me what you think. But and I don't mean that like antagonistically towards like a you that's sitting there, just saying in general, right, at a certain point in our journeys, we just don't care anymore. But anyway, it was like this intelligence, and that's why it had that AI quality where it could like track her mind and catch any little corner that she went, and she had all this sort of like unprocessed trauma and wounding, which helped her to heal. It helped her to heal because she had to, in order to outpace this thing, which reminds me of something I'm going to talk about next. And so, but anyway, that occasionally I would get like real mama bear and just like kind of challenge it, and then it would like put the overlay on me, which was really good because then I would get to see the extent of the darkness, and it helped me to support her and to understand. But one of the things that I saw was the agenda, the full extent of the agenda, because I feel like we were working with one of the very, very darkest fractions, because I've had overlays on me before, and they were bad, but they weren't like this. Like it was so fucking dark and terrifying. And I could see that it was like this hell realm that they wanted to trap everybody in, like this fourth dimensional program where you were just completely disconnected from your souls. And I felt it. I felt it in myself. I felt as if I was trapped there. And I knew that I wasn't, and I knew that I would get out because it was her overlay, not mine. I just had it on me for a minute, so I was able to get out of it and then help her more. But so, there were elements of that type of energy in what I was feeling this weekend, but that was like the worst, the worst, the worst, the worst, the worst. And I knew that that's never going to become our reality. We're never going to be trapped like that. It's just not going to happen. It's like their arrogant agenda, and they can't see that the game is over, and they keep reviving it. But it's never going to last long. And I've been around the block enough times to know that. So I wasn't actually afraid that we had like lost the timeline or that things took a wrong turn and that was it. But that's absolutely what it felt like. And I felt like I had to just like sit in there, and I was writhing the entire time. I was so uncomfortable. But it felt very, very important to me to just sit in there with eyes wide open, and to just witness there. It was like part of the part of like defragging the system, or part of putting like structured water, putting an integrated consciousness, even if that integrated consciousness was having a really hard time being in there. And that's exactly what my daughter did with her thing. And I could see that. I could see that because I was receiving messages for her. She was placed in the darkest of the dark because her soul could handle it. And even if she was freaking out the entire time, just her soul being there was in service. And there were others doing that at the same time. Very young people. This was a year ago. There were other young people, autistic people. My daughter's not autistic, although I think we could probably all be labeled that, any starseed, but a lot of the like severely dysfunctionally autistic kids were getting hit at that time as her as well. So anyway, these different like special ops, right? Special ops again, going in and doing that. So there was another one this weekend, and if you were somebody that was doing that, oh my God, we were in it together. You were not alone. We were doing a job. We were being present in a lot of density, and it was so not freaking fun. But for me, then I got released. I was going down to the desert because I had plans to go see my son, and then everything I was able to stretch out because I wasn't in the collective energy, because I was out in the middle of nowhere. And so even though you can feel collective energy even if you're in the middle of nowhere, it really helped because this town, the town that I'm in, it's pretty, it was pretty thick. Yeah, we'll just say that it was pretty thick with that. And so anyway, so I had this dream. I had this dream. It was Saturday night. I think it was Saturday night. I think it was, yeah, I think it was Saturday night. Yeah. And so I had a friend come in, a soul sister, and she came in like a hawk, and she just like swooped me up. She just swooped me up and let me know she was feeling the exact same thing. And we just decoded and powwowed and kind of like came to that still point where we were just, like panting, like we had just swam across the ocean. And so that night I had this dream that I was running up a hill. I posted this on Facebook, and then I ended up taking it down because I just felt so crowded in the energies in general. I couldn't put much of myself out there. I didn't want like any more energy on me. I felt like I wanted to like tear my skin off, which is another thing. Okay, I might not even pull any cards. I'm already at 30 minutes, but yeah, there's just a lot of decoding this weekend. And so so anyway, I had this dream. I was running up a hill, and there was this huge energy behind me. It didn't have a form. I did kind of feel like I was in the forest. I absolutely think it was the energy of fire, the fire, because of the translated to me because of the area that I'm in and what's going on with our forests. But I was running up this hill, and it was like this like rolling like it was like the biggest thing, and it like took up, it was like everywhere, and it was coming right after me, and I was running, and somehow I was always a step ahead of it. I was always a step ahead of it. And at one point I was reflecting, and I was like, if this were real, I would be consumed. I would just absolutely be consumed. I wouldn't have any other choice, and it would be okay. Kind of like what we had talked about in the last reading, when we sign up for those lifetimes, we're taken down. But it's part of something that our soul needs to learn and experience, so that like at this point now, we have all that training, and we understand the energies and the frequencies, and we can, it was like that. So I was like, well, if this were real. But I thought that was interesting that I was saying if this were real, because it reminds me of the energy of that darker fraction that was just trying to like devour as much as it could, and it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, just like the fire now, eating all this dry fuel, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And yet at the same time, it's kind of a bad analogy, because the fire very much is real, but this energy of the dark fraction getting bigger and bigger and bigger and going to take over the whole world, that's what's not real. That's what's not real. And I was always one step ahead. I was always one step ahead of it. And so, that fear of, on the one hand, so here's this again, right? On the one hand, the fear of the rising of the negative and the predator, and, that it's going to devour you. On the other hand, the fear of the rising of the energies and of the activation. And so one of my the woman that came in, my soul sister that came in and swooped me up like a hawk. Okay, hawk. That's another thing that I'm going to talk about in a minute. She was saying like, well, it's mass awakening. It's about mass awakening. And at that point, I was so down in the fourth dimension, holding my little light, that I was just like, okay, I'll get to that later. I'll get to that later. I can't hear that right now. But it is the opposite side of the same coin, because when the dark fraction is that big, so is the opposite, the light, the awakening, and the catalyst. And so for those of us that were feeling it on a very energetic level, and feeling that intense energy, that exact intense energy that is being used for darkness is also being used for light, and the light wins, because that's what's actually real. Okay, so that day. And that next day after that dream, I was driving down to the desert, and I was like, wow, this is like threshold energy. This is major threshold energy, because I felt like I was losing my mind. It's like I was expanding into territories in my psyche, or in my consciousness, or in my seeing, or in my, and that was sort of getting kicked up for me too, because I was seeing into a density that not a lot of people were seeing in, right? And that can make you feel kind of crazy, even if you're not. It can kick up kind of traumas of the past of feeling crazy. And so this was happening for me before 3 years ago, when my body started activating from the solar energy, and I was having all the thymus activation, and I didn't understand what was going on, because there wasn't a lot out there. Now, like, and I think I was saying this last time too, now everybody knows about solar weather, and everybody talks about it, and you can find it everywhere. And but 3 years ago, you had to really dig, and even then we all thought we were going nuts, and so But I was having dreams back in that time that was guiding me and was telling me, like, look to the sun, and this is about activation, and you're safe, and all this. And I had a lot of synchronicities and stuff like this. And so it was very, very threshold, very, very threshold energy, where I was being asked to trust myself in a way that could have, to my mind, gotten me killed, if there was something wrong with my body. Okay, so I had to bust through a lot of fear programs. And so there was this one time 3 years ago where I was driving down to the desert, and I was really nervous, and I was praying, for signs, and I was always getting signs and stuff like that. But so I stopped at my pea spot. I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and at my pea spot is this huge hawk nest, and there's never any hawks in it, and I just, pee and look at this hawk and nest and think about hawks. Well, this time there was a hawk in it, and she was lifting up her wings, and there were like her little babies under there. And I just got into this like one mind space with the hawk, where like everything kind of collapsed. And I got this download from the hawk, and it was all about unity consciousness and ascension and where we're going and what we're doing and what this is all about. And the hawk was like, I'm doing this with you. Like, I am you and you are me, and we're all going through this, and you're not crazy. You're right on the threshold. You're right on the cutting edge. So, and I ended up getting this hawk feather tattooed on me because of that, because it was that download of like, don't be afraid of the thresholds, and like allow yourself to expand, because that's what this is about. We're expanding back into unity. We're expanding back into all that is. We're expanding back into our memories and all this. So I'm driving down on this Sunday, and I was thinking about, I didn't remember the hawk. I wasn't thinking about the hawk, but I was like, this is a very similar energy. This is threshold energy, but whereas before it was just me and myself in my expansion, I was like, holy shit, this time it's the whole collective. And that's when I saw it that very next day, after my friend had mentioned the mass awakenings. I was like, this is a mass awakening. This is a mass awakening, and I could feel it. I could feel the collective threshold. On the one side of the coin was the feeding frenzy and all the mind control and the manipulation. Right on the other side of that coin was the threshold energy that humanity was bumping up against, whether they know it or not. That's terrifying. And it's like in my dream where I was like running, it was like trying to outrun this like unstoppable wave. I used to have dreams like that when I was younger, about tsunamis, and I would run from the tsunamis. And finally I went and I laid down like where the water meets the sand, and the tsunami never came. And so then when I would have tsunami dreams after that, I would get into the water, I would run to the water, and I was like a mermaid or a dolphin, and I was playing with others. And in fact, my friend, my soul sister, she was the one that had her family with her. So she was with family for the first time in a really long time. She usually has a lot of alone time, and she had sent me that night a photo of her family in the ocean, and it was the codes, the exact energy from my dream with the tsunami. So you see how spirit works. There's all these symbols and clues all the time. And so that energy of joy and harmony and celebration on the other side of that wave represents consciousness. That wave represents that which is pushing us over the edge. So we've been getting a lot of Ten of Swords in the readings, going over the edge. You have nowhere left to go but out over the edge. And even my daughter was like, yeah, it's like a bull is pushing us over the cliff into where we need to go, So it's like, there's the ascension energies pushing us, and that's the truth, right? Whereas like, well, if this were real, I would be consumed. And it's like, well, we are being consumed, but we're being consumed into awakening and into our wholeness. And then of course the opposite polarity kicking up against that, because when we awaken and we stabilize in 5D and above, we're out of range of the fourth dimensional trapping systems, which is what they're hooking us with the mind control, and with steering us away from our natural, very appropriate feelings for unity and harmonization, and corralling it back down into the fourth dimension, where it can be fed into the system of divisiveness through divisiveness. So taking our attention away from that, going up higher. And so of course there's going to be an uptick, and they're going to be trying to delay this, and we are coming closer and closer into the solstice and into another node point in our human trajectory at this time. And so, wow, what a wild ride. So I'm driving down there, and I'm thinking about this. I'm like, it's a collective threshold. Oh my gosh, this is about awakening. And then all of a sudden, boom, there's a hawk right in front of my car, literally, like right here, and I was like, shit. And I slammed on the brakes, and everything fell off my seats, and I hit it. I hit this hawk, like right in front of my face. I hit this hawk, and I was just like, shit, because I hadn't quite stabilized and gotten the whole big picture yet. I had to commune with my soul sisters, because it takes a fucking team right now. It takes all the different pieces, we all have different pieces, we put them together, we're all holding this web where we can hold it up and see the truth of reality, because we're working on so many different levels right now, because again, we're feeling behind the scenes, and then the feeling behind the scenes is clearing us, and then we're being activated, and all these things. So anyway, I hit the hawk, and I saw it as a really bad omen, and because I was still kind of like a little bit like teetering on hell realm. And so I was like, oh my God. So I was looking for a place to pull over so that I could like see if it was okay, or maybe I could do something for it. And I looked to my left, and right beside me are two hawks flying with each other. It was the hawk. I'm assuming it was that same hawk, because unless there were three, but there were two hawks flying together with their mate. They were mates, I'm assuming, flying right beside my car, for a really long time over in the brush. And I was just like, I couldn't even believe it, So it's like I hit the hawk, but the hawk was okay, and then the threshold, and the fear of the threshold, and the hawk coming again to say, you're okay. We're doing this together. We can take some hits, take one for the team, go down in the fourth dimension, hold the light, like create a stairway for others. And so then I'm driving a little bit further, and I was just like, holy crap. I was kind of in shock. And, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, so I go on my phone. I know I shouldn't, but I go on my phone and check the space weather, because I'm like, this is intense, And I look, and I'm looking at Pam, one of the Pam Youngins, I think. And I see a friend of mine that I had connected with her energetically on a post from earlier, and I just felt this like, whoa, like I felt really honed in on her, and I felt like there was just like some energy between us. So she had commented on the space weather post about how at the exact time of this last flare, there was a crow that had gotten in the skylights of her home, the home she was staying in, with the cat she was staying with, this black cat that was like a notorious bird killer. And she heard all this like thumping, and she didn't know what was going on. So she goes in the room, and she sees the crow, and she expected him to be hurt or mangled or like on his last breath. And he looked at her like, oh, good. I was like waiting for you to come in, I was waiting for you to come in. And she opens up the window, and the hawk flies out. It's perfectly fine. And it flies away with its mate. And so I immediately voice messaged her and was like, you're not going to believe what just happened to me. And then right after it, so her and I were back and forth for the next 2 days, powwowing, putting things together. And seeing the symbols in all of this, it's like we thought something bad happened, the omen, the death, and yet the birds were fine, and that both of us, we were put together that day, we both had a very similar thing, and that they flew off with their mates. So there's that counterpart energy where we have both the polarities together. We have our masculine and our feminine, our light and our dark, they're all together, and when they're together, we're that God fractal, and that's when there is no attack, and there is no, it's like it all comes together in unity, but sometimes it has to get separated out. Sometimes you have to see one and then the other. Sometimes you have to have a catalyst in the fear space, to ignite you and activate you and open you to have. And the other thing about crow and raven is like you've earned the right for more magic. You've earned the right, And then the hawk being hawks have always meant for me like you're on the right track. You're exactly where you're meant to be. You're exactly where you're meant to be. You're not lost in hell realm. Humanity's not going to be lost in hell. All this. So amazing and beautiful. And it wasn't until I got back to the desert house and I was telling my son about this that I remembered my experience with the hawk 3 years ago. And so really, really beautiful. That threshold energy and that energy coming in for humanity at this time, where there might be some fear, there might be some, and there's always goblins at the gate. When you're going into a higher frequency, you're on that threshold, going into a higher frequency, a more expanded version of yourself, more of you coming online. There's always going to be your own personal fears that come up to be cleared as you walk through that threshold, but also the entities from the darker fourth dimensional fraction that want to keep you down as well, so they can continue to feed on you, because the more of us that get out of range, the more game is over. So it's kind of where we're at in the game right now. So that was 43 minutes. I'm just going to pull a couple cards just to see what else it wants to illuminate after everything that I just said. Oh, Parrot Spirit, watch your words. So that's so interesting, because last time we got Pig Spirit, watch your mind. Watch your mind wisely. And so that was the thing. And so I'm noticing these readings are a little bit prophetic, at least for me, because every time I do one recently, I then experience what it says. So it was that thing of watch your mind, where it's like you can look at things from either side of the coin, and just being careful not to like affirm the negative and fall under with it, just being careful where you put your focus in that type of thing. And especially, when you're feeling those sort of like hell realm type of frequencies, like interference and all that stuff, just being careful. So now we get another kind of warning card: watch your words, and knowing that how we speak. I need a drink here. Hold on a sec. How we speak and what we put out there is what we're going to be experiencing. So being very careful with our words and with what we're saying. Always a good reminder. And also when we have sort of like earth catastrophes going on, like with the fires, and just always speaking in the positive, and speaking what we want, speaking what we want to be creating, and speaking truth, speaking from the highest dimensional alignment possible, always seeing the positive, always seeing the positive. Yeah, okay, so let's see what else. Seven of Fire. Oh, wow, beautiful. Seven of Fire and Three of Earth. So, Three of Earth, Earth is my collaboration card, the soul community, the soul contract card. So, there's a whole group of us doing this right now. And this is the Seven of Wands. The Seven of Wands is a card of protection. It can be a card of defending something. In this deck, it's like the unicorn up on top of the mountain. So there's like all the magical thinkers, all of you who your whole life, saw things a certain way. You were the unicorn, and when you were younger, maybe it always worked out. You just kind of like bumbled through life, and it's just everything worked out. You always had what you needed. You're always in the right place, and somewhere along the way, you fell into this kind of mind fuckery, just the kind of thing we were talking about, like watching your words. You started viewing yourself in a negative way. You started buying into the whole program that like of lack and limitation, and you fell out of your alignment. I feel there are a lot of us coming back into our alignment, coming back into our magical selves, and accessing things that have been dormant, not only from when we were younger and we had them active, but even more coming online and helping each other with that. And so I'm feeling that with a huge crew of people, like my hawk sister who swooped in and helped me, and then my crow sister who I communed with the next day, and then people in town here that I'm collaborating with and working with. In fact, a friend of mine, we were in the forest in the exact spot where the fire started. We were in Meadow Creek, and then that's where the fire started at Meadow Creek. And we didn't start it, like literally, but we were communing, and we were defending our unicorn selves, and we were noticing and talking about and really being really clear and discerning about where we were still leaking our energy and feeding the archonic self-serving, life atrophying forces in our lives, wherever it was, wherever they show up, whether it's a narcissistic partner or mold or entities, or like what I was saying before, or just negative thinking or speaking in the negative, or getting caught up in sexual magnetism, false magnetism, sexual predatory type of energy. And wherever it is that we're leaking and feeding these systems, we were really cleaning it up so we could defend our unicorn, so we could have our circuitry intact. And at one point there were these two trees, and I have so many photos of these trees over the years. There are these two trees, and they're kind of beside each other, and then they kind of like go off like this, and their branches are like entwined, and they're together, they're friends, but they give each other space. And so she went and she stood in between these trees, and she was like, wow, I feel really hot. She's like, I feel like I'm having a hot flash. And she stood there, and she was like, whoa, and then she got out, and then I was like, huh. So I went in, and she came in the front, and I went in the back. She's like, oh, you're going in the back way. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess I am, So we had both ends covered, and I'm standing there for a while, and I'm looking at the bark, and all of a sudden I start feeling kind of dizzy, and then I start getting really hot, like internal heat. And we were both saying like, oh, we feel it like in our faces, we feel it here. And then I felt nauseous, and I got out. And then that night or the next morning, that part of the forest is on fire. And it was just so bizarre. It was so bizarre. And here is the Seven of Fire, the Seven of Wands, and these sparks of fire around. And it's almost like, the symbolism of working together, and even with the forest, and even with Mother Nature, and the volcanoes, and the earthquakes, and the forest fires, and all the things, working together as a team, clearing away everything that, those timelines, those energies, those darker energies that we feed, that we buy into, that we give power by believing in them. So again, watching your words, what are you putting your focus and your attention on? How are you describing things? How are you viewing it? Are you viewing it as if it has power over you? Because it doesn't. And there's my dream again, where it's like it's not even real. Somehow I'm effortlessly running up this hill, always ahead of this like huge power, and so just claiming the truth of our reality, and but all of us working together to doing that. And so the trade that I'm doing with the person who's helping me with my fashion is just, we're just bringing out each other's magical selves, and we're affirming, and it's like we're walking each other home, and finding that tribe, and that tribe coming wherever it is, whether it's across the world, one in Mexico, one in London, one in Belgium, one in, wherever you are, or in your town, or in the dream space, or with nature, but all of us working to bring back this our original selves, the original truth of this realm. Huge collaboration energy right now. I'm also having a lot with ants. Like, I got bit the other day. I was like, when I was in the desert, and I was all blissed out with the acacia trees and smelling their perfume, and one of them must have like crawled off the tree, and it got down my dress, and it bit me in the back. It bit me, and it hurt really bad. And usually the fire ants, it'll hurt for like hours, but it's kind of like the hawk. It only hurt for about 30 seconds, and then it was gone, and then it got like a little bit itchy like 2 nights later, and that was it. It was like, yeah, it's like there's a lot of message of like, it's you might take a little hit, but it's not so bad. It's not as bad as you think, or it's not as bad as it used to be, or could be, or like there might be some fear, but it's all going to work out. That kind of message. But the ants, and then another friend of mine, this one in the forest, she had an ant thing going on recently, and then so the man I was doing the fashion work was talking about ants today and his connection with ants. So a lot of messages of that collaboration. Okay, so I think I'm just going to pull one or two more cards, and then I'll wrap up. I'd like this to stay around how long it normally is, which is about 53 minutes is usually. Oh, the King of Wands. Okay, the King of Wands. Let me clarify that. I guess I'm going to do this deck. The King of Wands has a real leadership energy, and he's very spirit guided, and so leading the way. And I think that's what a lot of us are doing as well. We're helping to bring ourselves and each other to liberate us into our full power, where we are leading the way from our unique expression, of all that is our divine spark, our unique gifts, and leading our part while the other one leads their part, all of us in our power, and bringing forth our gifts to help weave this together, to help weave the, do what we came here to do what we came here to do, which was to defend and protect the codes that we came in with, that were I was going to say slowly, but there's a quickening. We're more and more and more, faster and faster, remembering more of ourselves, and more of our power, and our leadership, and our contribution, our service. Okay, so this is the name of this deck. It's called Witch. It's Women in Total Control of Herself. Okay, and so that's a number 1 card. So there's that energy that we're moving into. I am going to stop there, and so that's what we're moving into. Whether you're a man or a woman, the woman in total control of herself, indicating being with this magical unicorn self, which is of the soul, which is that feminine energy within us. The feminine is what got kicked out and outcast from this realm as we started to buy into the program that would steer us away from our intuition, and away from our inner knowing and our power, our true power, and into the programs, and into distancing our power, into medical institutions or religious institutions that are just guiding us astray, or political movements that are making us feel like we're doing something, but really we're just feeding the whole damn system, being separated out from that feminine energy, that feminine intuition, the soul-based life. So this being men and women in total control of herself, pulling your energy back, not giving your power away, not following trends, not following the mind control or the media or what you are told you're supposed to be doing, but bringing it all back home, sitting in the constellation of your star-seated self with your harvest there, which comes naturally as you pull back your energy, your circuitry being intact, which is what my friend and I were working on in the forest that day, so that we have our own magnetism to transmit and to attract from the truth of who we are, playing our divine part at this point in human evolution. So again, coming with this warning, these are pretty light cards. I think I will pull one more, just because I'm aware that there's a little bit of like premonition energy in these cards, to get. Oh wow, the full picture of the masculine, isn't that beautiful? And that's very, very true. When the feminine energy within us is sitting on her throne, she's sitting in her constellation, and she's trusting herself, and she's in her power. The masculine energy within us rises up. As she rises, he rises up to contain her and to protect her and to be with her. So again, that polarity, both sides of the coin, when we have them both in, then we're unstoppable. Nothing can touch us, like the hawk and like the crow and like the message of the ant bite. It's like we can move through anything because we're not in division against ourselves, which is exactly what the control fractions want us to do. They want to divide us from each other. If we're divided from anyone in our realm, then we're divided from within ourselves, and then we do not have that God fractal that helps us to create and to be in alignment with our birthright and with what we came in with and what we're gathering more and more and more and more in collaboration with others. They don't want that collaboration with others. They want us divided so that we don't remember our angelic human template, so that we can live from that, which is our birthright and which is the point of this ascension at this time. So how freaking beautiful. There it is. There it is, coming. Very different decks, but also the lunar symbolism as well, which is, oh God, that's a whole other thing, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, a lot of distortions in this realm, but still, we'll just go with it that they match. They match. They're in this realm. They're overcoming the hijacks. They're overcoming the program. Being with yourself, your masculine, your feminine, your polarities, your spirit, your matter, your light, and your dark. Being willing to go into those dark places when you're called to go in them, and standing strong and knowing that you're not separate, because you can't be separate. You can't be lost in one. You're both. Sometimes you can only see one, but there's a purpose in there for that. There's a purpose to go into that darkness, to hold the light for others. And again, knowing that these two fractals or the two polarities are always together, and that's the source of our power. So this is actually a really positive reading. Aside from this kind of watch your words. There is a lot of indication of soul family and soul contribution coming back into your original, coming back into that power. And again, major punctuation point at the end here, that power being needing both of our polarities intact. And so basically embracing everything and not having that divisiveness towards any other, because it's all part of the grand symphony and it all has its part, and even if it feels a little funky for a while, it has its part to play. There's nothing ever wrong. There's nothing, because it's the truth of reality is the law of one. It's all together. It all belongs. And just because it looks separate doesn't mean that it's wrong or that it should be outcast. It should be embraced and felt, even if the embracing is just feeling and being with it and allowing it to bring you the pieces of information that you need, and allowing everything to be there in unity together is really the name of the game. But this is really beautiful. And even with the hawk and the crow and their mates, a real symbol of that unity within, and rising also in our world, again, as the feminine energy within us pulls back, her energy leaks and has her magnetism and her container to attract in everything that she needs. The masculine energy responds. It responds. And I saw that in the session I had today. It was like my feminine energy was just like so ready to go on my left side and my hip, and my right side had to like catch up and like follow. It had to catch on board. Oh, I'm getting this whole tingling on my, like right here. I just got like weird chills, like a rainfall on like the left side of my head. That's so interesting. That's how it is in energy sessions. We're just always tracking, like, oh, now I'm feeling this in response to this, and it's so much fun to decode. But yes, the masculine energy within us getting the memo once she sits in her constellation, once she sits on her throne, and is like, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to lead. I'm ready to be spirit led. We're ready to be spirit led, and then we are spirit led, and we have our polarities intact. So 57 minutes. Oh my God, that's the longest reading I've ever done. Well, hello and goodbye if you've made it this far. Thank you for watching, and thank you for, just for being here and for doing all the things that you do, and for sitting in those hard places. If you did this week, that this weekend as well feels really, really, really important. Huge threshold energy, huge mass awakening, and just sitting with all the feels, however they represent, and knowing that this one, our inner selves are at the helm, and that everything is following. The hawk didn't die. The crow didn't die. Everything is going to be okay, even if it feels a little lopsided at times. We got this. We're doing this. We're moving forward. It's really, really intense right now. And so watch your words, watch how you're framing things, but knowing that this is a collaborative effort, and this is about the rise of our true selves, our true selves that we came in with and that we're unlocking and remembering more and more and more. So thank you so much for the collaboration and for the soul family that's gathering here, especially on Facebook. And again, if you'd like to follow on Facebook, that's kind of where all the energy is, for these readings. My name is Wendy Biondo, Biondo. And also, if you would like a personal reading, I do FaceTime readings as well as pre-recorded readings, and also readings down at Mystic on Friday in Silver City, down New Mexico, down at Mystic noon to 3 on Fridays and Saturdays, unless I can't handle humans, and then I will be at home. So check in with me as well if you want to. So, all right, and much love to you all, and I'll see you next time if I do.